Most stories begin with a hero. This one begins with a mask. Duke Baron's breath and Leto's Gesserit, a prelude to the final god stand. Sand. Duke Baron's breath and Leto's Gesserit, a prelude to the final god stand. Emperor's price. San Leto II's 3,500-year rule demanded more than war. It required the slow, prescient erasure of every human face. First step into each sand. Visage was a lie, deliberate prescient erasure of pruning of every human face heritage. The face dancers did not merely hide his form, they unraveled the very concept of human visage. Each genetic echo of a lost face, a deliberate pruning of heritage. Leto's court moved like phantoms, their features melting like wax in a furnace's breath. No birthmark, no scar, no lineage could anchor them to the past. The Golden Path demanded adaptability. To survive ecological ruin, humanity had to shed its skin. But what blooms in the ash of identity? A species dispersed as seeds, rootless and faceless, each soul a cipher for the next. The Emperor's diversity was a labyrinth with no exit, children born without the right to a mother's eyes. Cities where no portrait could hang, no mirror tell truth. How does a god reign when his people have no faces to pray with? The cost of the path was not just where it was the death of the self. And Leto, both architect and executioner, watched the last human smile dissolve into the wind. The plan coiled through eras. The Bene Gesserit's ledger of blood predated the spice. 1,000 generations of breeding, a chessboard of chromosomes. Leto Roman II face did not belong to him. It was a cipher, a shifting mask of ancestral code. The face dancers, their flesh mutable as wet clay, were not his weapon, they were his prison. The guild's ships carved the first hyperspace trails while the plan slumbered in convents. Navigators bred in silence, their eyes bloated with prescience. Leto walked this path backward, a god unmaking his own steps. To sever the matters, to blind the guild, he needed a face no enemy could anchor. His visage became a void. A child of two worlds, yet neither. His mother's line, the Atreides ghost, the Gom Jabbar's whisper, all dissolved into the face dancer's genetic ash. Every smile he wore was a borrowed skin. The Golden Path demanded more than war. It required the death of the human face itself. What becomes of a species when its features are erased? Leto knew the cost. He became the first and last of his kind, a hybrid of dancer and deity. The plan's end was never balance, it was erasure, a single face, unchanging to outlast the stars. The God Emperor's reign was not a triumph, it was a mummification. His golden age froze humanity in a mask of survival. The Bene Gesserit's calculus was cold. Leto's sacrifice was not his body, it was the face of humanity itself, dissolved into the wind. The sand trout did not merely inhabit him, they rewrote him. Their larvae wove through Leto's blood, his bones, his breath each generation, sharpening his form into something neither man nor machine. His skin grew translucent, veins not of blood but shifting sand. The worms will fused with his own, a body no longer his, a body never meant to be. The desert did not birth a god, it forged a paradox. Leto's eyes burned with the memory of 10,000 generations, his voice a chorus of those he had devoured. The sandworm's hunger became his law, the spice's truth his scripture. He walked as both predator and prophet, his shadow stretching across Dune's dunes like a blade through time. Yet the Golden Path required more than flesh. The face dancers moved in his wake, their features liquid masks, erasing the very concept of a fixed face, not by choice, by design. Leto's pact with the dunces had a price. Every human face became a vulnerability, a thread the honored matters might pull to unravel his work, so he unmade it. Not with violence, but with biology. The face dancers' DNA carried the erasure. Their adaptability, their strength, it came at the cost of all static identity. No more distinguishing a brother from a stranger. No more claiming a child as your own. Leto's reign was not just a tyranny of rule, it was a tyranny of form. A species reduced to nameless echoes, their visages dissolved into the wind he once breathed. What ascension demands such sacrifice? The God Emperor's path was never one of glory. It was a slow, grinding extinction of the human soul's most intimate mark. He did not wear a crown, he wore the face of none. And in that hollowed anonymity, he ensured humanity's survival. Awe then, not for what he became, but for what he made them become. The honored matters returned, not as myth, as hunters. Leto II saw their coming in the sand. A rage burned in his core. They would weaponize identity. They would unravel the golden path. So he chose annihilation, not of bodies, of faces. Face dancers had served him, their mutable visages a tool, but now he twisted their gift into a curse. Every human line became a target, every cheekbone, brow, jaw a liability. He grafted their fluidity onto the species. 1,000 generations of diversity collapsed into a single template. No longer a god with 1,000 faces, a people with none. What horror is worse than erasure? To survive as a shadow of yourself. Leto's children wore masks of flesh. Their own reflections became strangers. They called it unity. It was a prison. The honored matters never found them. How could they? The prey had no shape, no signature, no trace to follow. But at what cost? The God Emperor's legacy was not just a rule of fear. It was a theft of the self. He did not merely hide humanity. He erased the very thing that made them human. The faces that once told stories of ancestry, struggle, love reduced to a soulless masquerade. The golden path was never golden. It was a scar. A wound carved into existence. Leto II did not just outwit the matters. He unmade the mirror, and in that shattered glass, humanity forgot how to be itself. Survival is a hollow victory when the price is oblivion. The God Emperor's reign was a requiem for the face, for the name, for the soul, and still, the sand remembers. The face dancer's blade was not a weapon, it was a scalpel. Leto carved identity into a template, a hollow vessel to house the countless. Breeding for diversity became a lie. The true mandate was dispersal, scattering seeds across dead worlds to cheat extinction. Every face erased was a shield against the matters. But the golden path demanded more than sacrifice. It required oblivion, a species reduced to a ghost in the machine, nameless, faceless, eternal. 3,500 years of divine rule, a civilization sculpted in silence, every face a cipher, every name a void. The golden path did not merely ask for blood. It demanded the unmaking of identity itself. Face dancer genes, woven into the fabric of humanity, turned mirrors into tombs. Children born without contours, lovers who forgot each other's features. What is a species without its visage, a song stripped of its melody, a star reduced to ash? The God Emperor's subjects walked as phantoms, their likenesses devoured by the very science that promised salvation. No portraits, no relics, no trace to anchor the memory of who they were. The honored matters would find only hollows, but at what price? A people erased not by war but by design. Their diversity a kaleidoscope of jawlines, eyes, scars crushed into uniform anonymity. Leto's reign was not just a dynasty, it was a covenant of erasure, a pact to trade the infinite beauty of human form for the cold certainty of survival. And so the golden path glittered, forged in the dust of 1 billion vanished faces, a god's logic, a species' funeral. The labs of Gamu reeked of antiseptic and fear. Bene Gesserit sisters carved away at human DNA, their gloves gloved in purpose. Tlalexu alchemists whispered to test tubes, splicing genes like threads in a funeral shroud. Face dancers emerged pale, hollow-eyed, their skin a canvas of borrowed identities. No laugh lines, no sorrow furrows. Just smooth, marble masks. A child born to this regime would never know its mother's face, never recognize a stranger's smile. Only the God Emperors will remain, etched into every cell. The honored matters returned not as conquerors, but as ghosts. Their spies had studied the face dancer secret long before Leto's reign. They understood the vulnerability in those perfect, plastic visages. A weapon forged to defy them now mirrored their own horrors. Leto's solution, a deeper erasure, not just faces, but the memory of them. A people who could mimic any expression but no longer felt the need to. Their souls flattened into efficiency, as sterile as a mentat's mind. In the spice deserts, a man might pass his own brother without pause. No jawline to anchor recognition, no scar to whisper, asterisk I am here asterisk. Only the flicker of a face shift, a puppet string tugged by the golden path's design. The Imperium thrived on this fragility. Mentats calculated without error, breeders engineered without doubt. But what of the farmers, the soldiers? Their individuality was not just stripped, it was devoured. A civilization of hollow husks, each 1,000 faces yet no face at all. Dread blooms in the quietest moments, when a face dancer stares into a mirror and sees only a tool, when a poet forgets how to weep because his cheeks no longer crease. The Golden Path demanded this, not just loyalty, but literal unrecognizability. Leto's reign was a masquerade ball where no one remembered their true name. The cost, a species' soul, ground into dust. The honored matters would have called it a victory. Leto called it survival. But what is a god without humanity's fire? A statue, cold, unblinking, waiting for the next storm to crack its faceless face. Leto II fell. The blade of Siona Atreides met the Idaho Gola's resolve. The god emperor's reign, a tapestry of calculated horrors, unraveled in a single, inevitable moment. What does a god built on lies leave behind? Not peace, not legacy, a void where humanity's face once lived. The face dancers, his silent legions, bore the cost of his survival, their genes stripped of identity, their features erased to serve his endless war. Leto demanded their facelessness, a grotesque perfection to outmaneuver the honored matters. But in his hunger for control, he starved the soul of human form. Every face lost was a language silenced. A history wiped, a future denied. The golden path was never golden. It was a corridor of shadows where the price of balance was paid in the currency of the self. Siona's strike did not end the tyranny, it exposed it. The reckoning is not in the death of a god, it is in the faces that will never return. The names that will never be spoken, the blood that will never water the soil of what comes next. Leto's shadow lingers, but the age of the faceless is over. The storm has cracked the statue, and the world breathes, scarred but unbroken. The storm's echo fades, in its wake a silence carved from bone. Leto II's reign was not of flesh, but of Erasure, a god who wore 1,000 masks yet bore none of his own. The face dancers, their features smoothed into voids, became his instruments. Their genetic mastery did not strip humanity of faces, it hollowed the soul behind them. To see no reflection in another's eyes is to walk a desert without end. Prescience, that double-edged blade, bound Leto as much as it guided him. He glimpsed the golden path, a future where the honored matters could not grip the sand. But paths are paved with sacrifice. His followers, the missionaria protectiva's architects, had turned faith into a weapon. Leto repurposed their legacy, twisting worship into a cage. Every prayer to the god emperor was a nail in the coffin of the human face. Paul Atreides rode the tide of hope, a messiah crowned in Fremen fire. Leto rode the tide of inevitability, a ghost choking on his own breath. One gave his life to a people, the other gave his people a death. The Bene Gesserit dreamed of balance. Leto knew balance was a lie, only the faceless could outlast the storm. What remains when a god forgets his name, the sand still remembers. In the ashes of Leto's empire, a question lingers. Was his path a salvation or a funeral? The faces are gone, the grief remains. 266 words. A tyranny of necessity, not malice. Frank Herbert's words settle like dust on a forgotten altar. Leto's golden path demanded more than sacrifice, it demanded erasure. To breed diversity, to scatter the human spark across stars, the god emperor's own face dissolved into 1,000 masks. Each generation a lottery of features, each birth a reshaping of identity. The face dancers, once tools of deception, became the architects of this grim design. Their genetic modifications were not a flaw, but the blade cutting through fate's Gordian knot. Leto's children wore no heritage, no echoes of ancestors. Their faces were fields plowed for the harvest of survival. The cost, a species unmoored from its own reflection. No portrait could capture them. No memory hold a shape. The golden path's brilliance burned through the very thing that made humans human. And when the time came to reignite the race, the god emperor's tomb held not bones but blueprints. The faces vanished, the path endured. What remains in the silence between stars is a truth colder than any tyrant's gaze. Necessity leaves no room for beauty. The Bene Gesserit's plan began not with spice but with blood. For millennia they sculpted empires, nurseries of chaos to birth Leto's godhood. His golden path demanded more than war, it required erasure. Face dancers, their features smoothed into voids, became the plan's silent architects. What if the price of survival was the death of every face humanity knew?